The 2021 preseason with the Hall of Fame game in one of the big stories. Ahead of the matchup, the injury to Dak Prescott's throwing shoulder. Originally, Mike McCarthy said Prescott wouldn't throw for a few days. Now, sounds like it might be longer than that.
After the research and looking at it, we just don't want this to turn into something big. So it's he's doing everything that he possibly can, but we're just being a little more conservative with his rehab. If it was in season, I think it'd be a different outlook, different focus. But this, because of where we are, having the extra week, we just want to make sure this doesn't turn into something bigger.
So that's a lot of words. Mike Tannenbaum, those are words you've spoken. Are you worried about this?
Absolutely, because I know what he really means, which is this is your starting quarterback that you're paying $40 million a year, and his shoulder is still not where it was a week ago, and it was just going to be a couple of days. Greeny, what is it going to be like in October and Thanksgiving? And we talked about this yesterday. Coach Parcells, great quarterbacks, they throw with their legs. What could he not do over the last year? He couldn't work off of his legs. So clearly his body is, scraping the rust off. And I'm concerned because when you hear about these little setbacks now, what does that really mean? And look, they still have a month until they play Tampa, Greeny, but because it's his throwing shoulder, we're not talking about his left shoulder, for a quarterback, I would be worried.
To be clear, they open 5 weeks from tomorrow night, the regular season against Tampa. And, Marcus, last week when this first came up, I asked Dominique Foxworth, at what point should this be a problem? And he said, well, if he's not throwing by the beginning of next week, then maybe it's really a problem. Well, here we are. This is the middle of this week. Marcus Spears, this is your team. Are you concerned?
No, I'm not. I'm not concerned. 5 weeks until the season started, and I get it. I understand. There should be a level of concern in my mind, but Dak's history and his past and what I know about the league just gives me zero concern. I'm not even convinced yet that it's really that serious in order for him to even be worried about it. And when I say based on Dak's history, I talk about how well he did coming back from this ankle injury. The management of his arm, because of what Mike T just said, a $40 million guy. And y'all, let's be real. Let me let America in on the real damn mystery about Dak Prescott's shoulder, okay? Because we're in the off season and we want to go crazy about it. First of all, I know about probably over 50% of quarterbacks at some point play with a sore arm or a sore shoulder. And the second part is, they gonna shoot the damn arm up if it's hurting still. They're going to numb it, and he's going to play. So, listen, for me to be overly concerned when I walked on the field and saw Tony Romo playing with cracked ribs and a back that was almost shot, and I saw Peyton Manning continue to play after a neck fusion, I'm not worried about a strain on Dak's shoulder 5 weeks out from the NFL season starting where real football matters. I'm just not.
Kimberly and I, as reporters, know that this remains undefeated. I've never heard a defensive player worried about a quarterback's injury. Literally never.
Right.
Not a one.
Exactly.
I got Ninkovich on here telling me he just needs to rub some dirt on it. Kimberly, what's the truth here? I got one vote for worried, one vote for not worried. How concerned should we be in Dallas?
I'm with Mike T. I'm worried. First of all, I'm worried because the Cowboys are my early pick for NFC East champions. But in all seriousness, I'm worried because I've heard coaches, I've heard GMs talk about injuries and not be a little forthcoming with it. You've had injuries in the past where, it's nothing, and then as time goes on, it's like, now he's day-to-day, now he's week to week. We've seen that before. I think with Dak, we haven't seen him on a field in over a year, in almost a year. Mm-hmm. And so to me, I'll feel better when I see Dak on the field. When I know that the foot, the ankle, that's good, the shoulder, throwing arm is all good. But until then, I can be worried.
Yeah, because Marcus, I know that you're saying quarterbacks always play with some sort of a sore shoulder, but it's usually not August 4th, right? Right? Don't they usually have that sometime in October or November? On August 4th, isn't that a little bit of a concern?
Yeah.
It's not a concern because all it tells me is that it's fatigue. Like that's what this tells me. Now, if we're dealing with something like a tear or something like that, we're having a different conversation. But it's fatigue. And Dak has been throwing long before training camp started. I want to remind people of that. So this may be all of that work, all of the stuff that he did in order. And remember, guys, he couldn't run around. He's been working with his upper body to stay in shape as well. So y'all go ahead and be worried. I'm fine. Dak will be fine. And unless they come out out and it becomes something catastrophic like's going on in Indianapolis, you won't see me sweating at all unless it's from this hot damn studio I'm in at my house.
Quick final word.
Yeah, Greedy, I don't have good vibes behind me, but what I would say is, like, Dak is a competitor, and the fact that he pulled himself out leads me to believe it's a little bit more than fatigue. If it was just fatigue, I think he'd still be out there.
And if he's fatigued in August, I'll say it again. I mean, we got a long way to go here. We'll see what winds up happening. The team they're playing tomorrow is the Pittsburgh Steelers. And, of course, there are lots of offseason questions in Pittsburgh, many of them surrounding that man, the 39-year-old quarterback Ben Roethlisberger, who was scheduled to have a $41 million cap hit. They ended up bringing him back. They created more cap space in so doing. The next order, they extended their head coach, Mike Tomlin, Super Bowl winner. He's never had a losing season in 14 years. They extended him through 2024. And then after finishing dead last in rushing last year, they addressed the backfield by taking Alabama's Najee Harris in the first round. He had over 1,400 rushing yards last year. The kid is an absolute stud. So they did all of that in the offseason. So why is it that Mike Clay, in his piece on all of the team's offseason moves, voted the Steelers as the least improved? You see, they're 32nd. A reminder, there are only 32 teams in the National Football League. They lost nearly their entire starting offensive line. They lost their edge rusher, Bud Dupree. And so there's been so much conversation about what it is the Steelers are or aren't. Marcus Spears, that would suggest that's one vote for they're not going to be any better. Are they the 11-0 team they started out last year, or are they the team that finished with a whimper and not a bang?
Gee, I don't believe they're either one. I believe they're somewhere in the middle of that. And the problem is we have the Steelers as a whole in totality a bad football team. That wasn't the case last year. We know the offensive line was the issue. This team won 12 games last year. Like, I'm not going crazy. At the end of the year, they tailed off because people figured out that they couldn't run the football, and they began to just sit on all of these little short passes. Now, here's the issue for me. If Pittsburgh comes out and they're doing something similar to that, it's going to tell me that you have put your cap on Big Ben's career. Because in order to have Big Ben play at an elite level, you have to think that the Pittsburgh Steelers would have addressed this offensive line, or they feel good about where they are, better about where they were last year, and draft a running back in a position where we all thought they could need a significant upgrade. Still Chase Claypool, still Juju Smith-Schuster, still Big Ben back there, and when he's protected, he was fine. He's not the Big Ben of old, but he is fine if he's protected as a quarterback and he's complemented with a run game. And then defensively, we all know what the Pittsburgh Steelers was last year and are going to be this year. Good, top, elite. That's where they are. That's where they hang out. So I'm not concerned about the Pittsburgh Steelers as far as improving their team, as long as within their building they feel like they address this offensive line. Because as far as skill position, quarterback, and the guys on defense, the Pittsburgh Steelers right there with everybody else in their division.
I agree. I think they addressed so many of the things they needed. Their offensive line stunk. So when we say that they have to replace a bunch of those guys, they were terrible on the offensive line last year. It's hard to imagine they're going to get worse from there. They also took Najee Harris. I don't know a single person who doesn't think he has a chance to be a superstar as an NFL playmaker. And if you're looking at players, they're getting Devin Bush back. They basically played last season without him. I know that's not an addition from outside the organization, but he didn't play most of last year, and he's going to come back healthy. I think they have improved. I'm looking at my skeptic over here, Mike
This is what I'm waiting
who looks
for.
unmoved.
I'm absolutely unmoved because that's not what the facts say. When we traded for Brett Favre, he said one thing: get me a pass-protecting running back. Najee Harris is going to be a superstar. I agree with you, Greeny, but if he cannot pass protect early, they lost the quarterback of the offensive line in Pouncey. And I'm just telling you, at 39 years old, for a guy that's made over $200 million, who was 28th in the NFL a year ago in yards per pass, the field's going to get shorter, his clock's going to get quicker, and the confluence of 3 new offensive linemen. Guys, I know how hard it is to replace one offensive lineman, let alone 3. And I hope Najee Harris knows protection's cold from day one. But if he doesn't, it's going to be a bad mix for Pittsburgh, and I think Ben's going to struggle.
I'm with you, Greeny. I think they're among the least improved teams, but I would say the Saints are worse as far as improvement. I don't know. I understand the offensive line issues. Najee Harris, how do you not get excited? I understand you need the O-line to be competent and in position and clear holes for this kid, but he's so dynamic. He's the reason you're excited. I trust Mike Tomlin. I trust that no matter what is happening behind the scenes, he's going to get his team to at least be competitive. I know they tailed off last year, but I think Big Ben will be a little bit better too.
One other X factor in the AFC North, Baltimore, now Cleveland and Cincinnati have good young quarterbacks.
Yes.
And Cleveland and Baltimore will be really good for all those years. And I think Mike Tomlin's great, taking nothing away from him. But they have three real competitors that for years, Greeny, they didn't have.